The diner was quiet that afternoon, with only a few regulars scattered across the worn booths and a faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows through the windows, and the cold had started to creep into the town, making the warmth inside the diner feel comforting. She wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, glancing at the clock and realizing she had a few more hours before her shift ended. Her body ached from standing all day, and her feet ached from the worn shoes that had carried her through years of long shifts. But she moved with a rhythm she had perfected over time. Every smile, every nod, every small word of kindness had become second nature. Yet she never stopped caring about the people she served. It was then that the door opened, letting in a gust of cold wind and the quiet jingle of the bell above. An old man stepped in, his coat heavy and worn, his hat pulled low over his brow. He looked tired, as though life had been weighing on him for a long time, and his steps were slow, careful, measured. He paused by the entrance, glancing around the room as if uncertain whether he wanted to sit down or leave. Most of the regulars barely noticed him, but she did. Something about his hesitation, his quiet presence, made her heart reach out to him instinctively. She approached him with a gentle smile. "Can I get you something to warm up?" she asked. Her voice was soft, friendly, easy. The old man looked up at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He shook his head, and for a moment she thought he might refuse. But then he whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe, just a little soup." Without thinking twice, she went to the kitchen, prepared a bowl of the house special soup, and brought it to him with a steaming mug of tea. The aroma filled the air, making the old man pause, his eyes lighting up slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, almost rusty with disuse. "You didn't have to." She shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "It's no trouble. Everyone deserves a little warmth on a cold day." He settled into a booth near the window, the light catching the lines on his face and making him look even older than he already was. He took small sips of the soup, nodding occasionally in appreciation. She watched him from the counter, feeling a strange pull of curiosity and empathy. There was a story in those eyes, she was sure of it, though she had no idea what it could be. As he ate, they exchanged small talk. He mentioned that he liked quiet places, that he had traveled through many towns but rarely found a spot that felt calm and welcoming. She listened, nodding, asking gentle questions, and trying not to pry too much. There was a delicate balance to be maintained, a respect for the unspoken boundaries of a stranger's life. Yet, in the short time they shared, she felt a connection that went beyond ordinary friendliness. Other customers came and went, the bell over the door jingling each time, but the old man remained in his corner, savoring the warmth of the diner and the kindness of the waitress. She continued her work, wiping tables, taking orders, pouring coffee, all while stealing glances at him from time to time. It wasn't often that someone like him appeared, someone who seemed to carry both the weight of the world and a quiet dignity that commanded attention without demanding it. After finishing his meal, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded note. He handed it to her with a trembling hand. "For you," he said simply. She took it, curious, unfolding it to find only one word written in elegant handwriting, "Heir." She blinked, taken aback, unsure of what to make of it. He smiled faintly and nodded, then stood, adjusting his coat and hat, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back at her, a silent understanding passing between them, and then he was gone, leaving her alone in the quiet diner. She stared at the note, the word "heir" repeating in her mind, her heart racing with questions and curiosity. What did it mean? Why had he chosen her? She tried to shake off the confusion, but deep down, she felt that this encounter was different from any other she had experienced. There was a sense of destiny, a feeling that her simple act of offering soup had set something in motion that she could not yet understand. The rest of her shift passed in a blur, her mind wandering back to the old man and the mysterious note. She served the remaining customers with her usual warmth, but there was a new energy in her movements, a subtle excitement she couldn't quite explain. When she finally locked up the diner and stepped out into the cold evening air, She hugged her coat tighter around her, thinking about the strange twist her day had taken. She walked home slowly, replaying the encounter in her mind, wondering if she would ever see him again or if it had all been a fleeting moment of connection. There was a lesson, she realized, in the simplicity of kindness, in the quiet power of reaching out to someone without expecting anything in return. She didn't know it yet, but this one small act, the warmth of soup, the smile, the attention, was about to change the course of her life in ways she could never imagine. As she drifted off to sleep that night, the word heir lingered in her thoughts. A mysterious promise, a puzzle waiting to be solved. She dreamed of possibilities, of doors opening, of a life that seemed distant yet suddenly within reach. And somewhere, far away, the old man smiled, knowing that he had found in her the heart that would honor his legacy, even if she didn't yet know it. The following day, the diner hummed with its usual rhythm, the soft clatter of dishes and the faint murmur of conversations filling the space. She had arrived early, as always, tying her apron with a practiced motion and glancing around the room to make sure everything was in order. Her mind, however, kept drifting back to the old man from the day before. The mysterious note with the single word, heir, had not left her thoughts. She tried to make sense of it, wondered if it was a joke, a mistake, or something more. The possibilities seemed endless, and yet none of them felt right. It was mid-morning when the door opened, letting in a gust of cool air that carried the faint smell of autumn leaves. She looked up and froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. There he was, the old man, standing by the entrance, his coat buttoned up tightly, his hat tilted just so. This time he did not hesitate. He walked straight to a booth in the far corner, a quiet determination in his movements. The regulars barely noticed him, their conversations continuing as if nothing unusual had happened. But for her, everything felt different. She approached him cautiously, a small smile playing on her lips. "Back again," she said softly. "Would you like some soup or tea today?" He looked up at her, his eyes holding a mixture of surprise and appreciation. "Yes, please," he said, his voice a little stronger than yesterday. There was a calmness in the way he spoke, as if he had made a decision about something important and was ready to follow through. She nodded and returned to the kitchen, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she prepared the soup, adding a little extra care to each step, as if somehow he could feel it. When she brought the bowl to him, he looked at her with a faint smile. "Thank you," he said again. But this time there was a different weight to his words, a hint that he had something to say but was choosing the right moment. She nodded, staying near the booth while pretending to clean a nearby table. She didn't want to rush him, but she was aware of the electricity in the air, a quiet tension that made her pulse quicken. As he ate, he glanced around the diner, taking in the familiar details with a careful eye, the worn wooden booths, the small counter with its neatly stacked napkins and silverware, the faint paintings on the wall. There was a sense of nostalgia in the way he looked, as if each object reminded him of something long past, something precious that had faded over time. She felt a tug in her chest, an understanding that he carried memories heavier than she could imagine. After a few minutes of quiet observation, he spoke, his voice low but clear. "I wanted to see you again," he said. "Not for the soup, though that was kind. I wanted to see the person who showed me a small act of kindness yesterday. In a world full of noise, it is rare to find someone who notices the quiet moments." She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. I just did what anyone would," she replied, unsure how to respond. She didn't want to appear boastful, and yet she felt a strange warmth at his words, a recognition that mattered more than any compliment she had ever received. He nodded slowly, folding his hands on the table. "It is not about what anyone would do. It is about the heart behind the action. That is what makes it meaningful. I have traveled a great deal, met many people, but seldom have I met someone who gives so freely, without expectation, without judgment." Her hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table, and she wondered what he meant. The word from the note, heir, came back to her, more mysterious than ever. She wanted to ask, but something in his eyes told her to wait, to listen, to let the moment unfold naturally. There was patience in him, a quiet wisdom that made her feel both nervous and comforted at the same time. The conversation drifted gently, moving from simple observations to reflections on life. He spoke of places he had seen, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned along the way. She listened intently, her own experiences mingling with his stories, forming a tapestry of shared humanity. There was no rush, no pressure, only a calm exchange of presence and attention. Each word, each glance, each small gesture carried a weight that made the minutes feel both fleeting and eternal. As the meal came to an end, he reached into his coat again, producing a small leather-bound notebook. He placed it carefully on the table in front of her. "This is for you," he said. "Inside, you will find the beginnings of a journey. I cannot explain it all now, but know that it is a trust, and it is earned by the kindness you have shown." She opened the notebook, flipping through the pages filled with neat handwriting, sketches, and notes. Her heart raced as she tried to grasp the significance of the gift. It was personal, intimate, and mysterious all at once. There was an invitation here, an opportunity that she had not sought but now could not ignore. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, the sensation of standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. He watched her closely, his expression unreadable, yet soft, gentle, and reassuring. "I will not explain everything today," he said. "Some things must be discovered in their own time. What matters is that you have the courage to notice, to care, and to act without expectation. That is the foundation upon which everything else is built." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words sink in. There was wisdom here, a lesson about life and the quiet power of attention and generosity. She realized that the soup, the small gesture she had offered, had been more than an act of service. It had been a moment of connection, a bridge between two lives that might otherwise have passed each other by without notice. The old man finished his tea, folded his hands on the table, and looked at her with a sense of completion, as though a part of a plan had been set into motion. "I will return," he said softly. "There is more to share, more to reveal. But for now, remember that the smallest acts often carry the greatest meaning. You have shown that, and it is not forgotten." With that, he rose slowly, placed a gentle hand on the back of the booth, and walked to the door. The bell jingled as he stepped out into the world beyond, leaving her alone once again. She sat in silence, staring at the notebook, feeling a combination of awe, confusion, and anticipation. This was no ordinary encounter. She could sense it in every line of his face, in every word spoken, and in the quiet energy that lingered in the diner. The rest of her shift passed in a blur, her movements automatic yet thoughtful, her mind repeatedly returning to the notebook and the man who had left it. When she finally locked the diner and stepped out into the cool evening air, the world seemed both familiar and new, as if a hidden layer of possibility had been revealed. The streets, the houses, the passing cars all took on a subtle glow, a sense that something extraordinary was quietly unfolding around her. She walked home slowly, clutching the notebook to her chest, feeling the weight of the pages and the significance of the gift. She wondered what lay ahead, what stories were yet to be told, and how a single act of kindness could ripple outward, creating consequences she could not yet see. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, the words of the old man echoed in her mind. "Small acts carry the greatest meaning, and trust is earned not by wealth or power, but by the heart and the courage to care." The next morning, the diner felt the same as always, quiet, familiar, yet tinged with a sense of expectation she could not explain. She arrived early, as was her habit, tying her apron and checking the small details that made the diner feel like home to its regulars. Yet, her thoughts were not on the counters or the coffee pots. They were on the notebook, on the old man, and the word heir that seemed to echo in her mind like a secret meant only for her. She wondered if he would return, if he had more to say, if the path hinted at yesterday was about to unfold further. The bell above the door jingled unexpectedly, and she looked up to see him standing there again. There was a quiet authority in his presence, a gentle certainty that demanded attention without force. He nodded at her, a brief, almost imperceptible acknowledgement, and made his way to his usual booth in the corner. She felt a strange mix of nerves and anticipation, as though the world had subtly shifted in ways she couldn't yet define. She carried over a fresh bowl of soup and a steaming cup of tea, placing them in front of him with care. "Good morning," she said softly. "I've kept your favorite ready." He smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Thank you," he replied, his voice calm but deliberate. He picked up his spoon slowly, savoring the warmth and the comfort of the simple meal. There was a weight in his gaze, as though he were measuring the moment, examining not only the soup but the person who had prepared it. She watched him quietly, feeling that her simple act of service was no longer just about hospitality. It had become something more meaningful, something that connected their lives in ways she did not yet understand. After a few minutes of quiet eating, he finally spoke, his voice steady and thoughtful. "Yesterday I gave you a word, a single word, and you did not question it. You did not doubt it, nor did you dismiss it. That shows a depth of character many fail to demonstrate. You noticed, you cared, and you acted without expectation. That is why I returned." She felt a flush rise to her cheeks, unsure how to respond. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand the weight of his words, but something in the quietness of his presence told her to wait, to listen, and to let the story unfold naturally. She nodded instead, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken acknowledgement. He leaned back slightly, folding his hands over the table. "You may wonder what the word meant, or why I chose you. It is not a test nor a game. It is a sign, a symbol of trust. I have lived many years, seen many things, and encountered many people. Some have impressed me with wealth, others with charm, yet very few have impressed me with genuine kindness. You have done that." She felt a lump in her throat, the words carrying more weight than she had expected. She had never considered that a small act, offering soup to a stranger, could hold such meaning. She had always done what she could to help, to make people feel welcome, but never with the thought that it could ripple outward, changing lives, including her own. He reached into his coat pocket once more, this time pulling out a small, folded envelope. He placed it gently on the table in front of her. "Inside this," he said, "you will find more than words. It is a key to a path that I believe you are ready to walk. You do not have to understand it fully now. The journey will reveal itself in time. All I ask is that you remain open, kind, and true to yourself." Her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope, feeling the weight of the paper, the ink, and the possibilities contained within. She carefully opened it, finding a letter written in precise, elegant handwriting. The words spoke of trust, of recognition, of a legacy meant not for those who sought it, but for those who embodied the values it represented. She read and reread the sentences, each one resonating deeply within her, stirring emotions she had not expected. He watched her reaction with quiet patience, as if understanding that the magnitude of the moment needed time to settle. "I am giving you a responsibility," he continued. "One that is not about wealth or status, but about care, empathy, and integrity. You have already shown that you possess these qualities. That is why I returned, why I chose to share this with you." She felt a mixture of awe and disbelief, the enormity of the situation pressing gently on her chest. It was not just a gift, she realized. It was a trust, a bond, and a challenge all at once. Her mind raced with questions, but she restrained herself, sensing that the answers would come in time, in moments that required patience and attentiveness. The conversation drifted into reflections on life, on human connection, and on the small choices that shape destiny. He spoke of moments of courage, of empathy, and of decisions made in quiet spaces that ripple through time in ways often unseen. She listened, captivated not only by the words but by the calm authority in his tone, the way his stories wove together lessons without preaching, teaching without demanding. Time seemed to stretch, the diner's usual rhythm fading into the background. Each word he spoke felt deliberate, each pause meaningful. She realized that this was more than an encounter. It was a passing of knowledge, a gentle mentoring that was both subtle and profound. She began to see how her own life, her own choices, had led to this moment, and how the smallest act of kindness could open doors to opportunities she had never imagined. As the morning wore on, he prepared to leave, but before stepping out, he placed a hand lightly on the back of her chair. "Remember," he said, "it is not the grand gestures, but the consistent, quiet acts of care that define a person. You have shown that, and it is not forgotten. I will return again, and then more will be revealed. For now, continue to live as you have, open, kind, and true to yourself." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect and gratitude. The bell jingled as he left, and she remained seated for a moment, holding the letter and feeling the quiet energy that lingered in the air. She understood that this was just the beginning, that the note, the envelope, and the encounter were steps along a path she was only now beginning to walk. The rest of her shift passed in a blend of focus and reflection. Every smile she offered to a customer, every cup of coffee poured, every interaction carried a new layer of awareness. She moved with intention, her heart open to the world in a way that felt both natural and profound. The notebook and the letter were tucked carefully away, not as possessions, but as reminders of the trust placed in her, the responsibility she was beginning to understand. When the diner closed, she stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, the sunlight catching on the pavement and making it sparkle. She walked home slowly, the notebook clutched to her chest, feeling a quiet anticipation for what was to come. The old man's words echoed in her mind, a gentle refrain that reminded her that life was shaped not by grandeur, but by care, attention, and courage. That evening, as she prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the encounters, the notes, the letter, and the quiet presence of the old man. It was clear that her life had changed, not in obvious ways yet, but in subtle, profound shifts that she could already feel. She realized that she was being entrusted with something far greater than she had ever imagined. A chance to step into a legacy built not on wealth alone, but on the enduring power of kindness, trust, and humanity. And as she drifted into sleep, the notebook resting beside her bed, she dreamt not of riches or fame, but of moments yet to come, moments of quiet courage and care that would shape her path in ways she could not yet see. The following week felt different to her, as if the rhythm of life had subtly shifted, though everything on the surface remained the same. The diner buzzed with the usual sounds of clinking dishes, muted conversations, and the faint hiss of the coffee machine, but she moved through it with a quiet awareness she had never known before. Each interaction with customers felt like more than a transaction. It was a small connection, a thread weaving her life into the lives of those around her. Yet, in the back of her mind, the old man and the mysterious word heir lingered, whispering of something larger, something she had not yet understood. It was mid-morning when the bell above the door rang, a sound that now carried with it a sense of expectation rather than routine. She looked up and saw him, the old man, standing there with the same quiet dignity as before. He nodded toward her, a gesture that spoke volumes, and made his way to the corner booth. She felt her heart quicken, a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation, as she prepared a fresh bowl of soup and a cup of tea, her hands moving carefully as she placed them before him. He looked up at her with a faint, approving smile. "Thank you," he said softly. "It is good to see you again." She smiled in return, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "It's good to see you," she replied. "I kept your favorite ready." As he ate, she stayed nearby, cleaning tables and pouring coffee, but her mind kept returning to the notebook and the letter he had given her. She had spent nights reading and rereading the words, trying to absorb their meaning, and each time, she felt a deeper understanding of the trust he was placing in her. It was not just about inheritance or wealth. It was about values, about care, empathy, and the choices that define a person. When he finished his meal, he leaned back slightly, folding his hands over the table. "I have come today to explain more," he said. "The word I gave you, the note, the letter, all of these were small steps leading to this moment. What I am about to share is not about money or property. It is about responsibility, about stewardship, and about recognizing the qualities that truly matter in life. She listened intently, her heart beating faster, as he continued. I am the last member of my family, and I have spent my life building something meaningful, not just for myself, but for the community and the people whose lives have touched mine. I have watched the world change, seen kindness often overlooked, and generosity taken for granted. When I met you, I saw someone who embodies the very essence of what I value. Someone who acts with care, without expectation, who notices the small things that others often miss. Her hands tightened around the edge of the table, her mind racing to process his words. She had never imagined that her simple acts of kindness, the soup, the attention, the patience, could hold such significance. And yet, here he was, recognizing and valuing them in a way that felt both overwhelming and deeply affirming. He reached into his coat and brought out a small envelope, placing it carefully in front of her. Inside this envelope, he said, you will find the formal acknowledgement of what I have been hinting at. It is not about wealth or status, but about trust, legacy, and recognition of the qualities that cannot be bought or sold. You are the person I have chosen to carry forward the values that have guided my life. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, revealing a simple, elegant document that named her as the recipient of his estate and the steward of his legacy. The words were clear and unambiguous, yet the true weight of their meaning settled gradually in her heart. She was no longer just a waitress. She was entrusted with something far greater than she could have imagined, something that required wisdom, empathy, and courage. He watched her carefully, his eyes calm but intense. I know this may be overwhelming, he said. It is natural to feel that way. What matters most is not the inheritance itself, but how you choose to honor it. It is a responsibility to use what you have been given wisely, to care for others, and to continue the work that I have started in my own way. She felt tears prick at her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, astonishment, and the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. She had spent her life working hard, helping others in small ways, and now, without seeking it, she had been given the opportunity to make a far greater impact. The enormity of it was both exhilarating and frightening. He continued, explaining the history of his family, the challenges they had faced, and the values they had upheld. He spoke of the importance of integrity, compassion, and humility, emphasizing that true wealth was measured not by money or possessions, but by the positive influence one could have on the world. She listened, absorbing every word, understanding that this was a chance to step into a role that demanded not only action but reflection, not only generosity but discernment. As the morning turned to afternoon, they discussed practical matters, the ways she could manage the estate, the people she could trust for guidance, and the ways she could continue the work that had been important to him. Yet, even in these discussions, there was an underlying emphasis on values, on choices, and on the quiet acts of care that ultimately defined a life well lived. She realized that this was more than a gift. It was a mentorship, a guide to living meaningfully, and a challenge to rise to her own potential. He paused, looking at her with a mixture of seriousness and encouragement. You may feel unprepared, and that is natural, he said. No one is ever truly prepared for such responsibility. What matters is that you act with honesty, kindness, and courage. Trust your instincts, and remember that every decision, no matter how small, contributes to the larger story. She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words sink in. It was a lot to take in, but she also felt a sense of clarity, a direction that had been absent before. Her life had been simple, predictable, and grounded in daily routines, but now it was expanding, opening up possibilities that she had never dreamed of. The fear she felt was balanced by excitement, and the uncertainty by a deep sense of purpose. As he prepared to leave, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I will return, he said softly. There is more to share, more to reveal, and more to guide you through. For now, remember that what matters most is the heart with which you act, the courage to care, and the wisdom to use what you have been given for the greater good. The bell jingled as he left the diner, and she remained seated for a moment, holding the envelope and reflecting on the gravity of what had just occurred. The air seemed charged with a new energy, a sense of purpose and potential that she could feel in every fiber of her being. She understood, in that quiet moment, that her life had changed irreversibly. She was no longer merely a witness to the world. She was now a steward, a guardian of values, and a participant in a legacy that demanded care, empathy, and thoughtful action. The rest of her day passed in a reflective haze. Every interaction, every gesture, every word she spoke felt layered with new meaning. She noticed the people around her more keenly, the small kindnesses they offered, and the ways she could contribute. The diner, once a place of routine, now felt like a stage for potential change, where even the smallest actions could ripple outward in unforeseen ways. That evening, as she returned home and set the envelope on her bedside table, she felt a quiet determination settling over her. She understood that her journey was just beginning, that the responsibility she had been entrusted with would challenge her, shape her, and ultimately transform her. She was no longer simply living for herself. She was living with purpose, guided by the values that the old man had recognized in her. And as she drifted into sleep, the weight of the day's revelations and the promise of what lay ahead mingled, carrying her into dreams filled with possibilities, courage, and the quiet power of kindness. The days that followed were unlike anything she had ever experienced. The diner, once just a place of work and routine, had taken on a new significance. Every interaction, every smile she offered, every moment of attention she paid to her customers carried a weight she had never noticed before. It was as if the world around her had expanded, and she had become part of a story much larger than herself. The envelope from the old man rested in a drawer at home, a constant reminder of the trust placed in her and the journey she had begun. She found herself thinking about him often, about the quiet dignity in his movements, the depth in his eyes, and the gentle authority in his words. Each visit to the diner had left her with a sense of purpose, a growing awareness that her life was now intertwined with his in ways she had never imagined. And yet, there was no pressure, no demand, only the quiet understanding that she had been chosen to carry forward something meaningful. One morning, the old man returned once more. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered, and she felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. He made his way to the corner booth, his steps measured and deliberate. She brought him his usual bowl of soup and a cup of tea, placing them before him with care. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady but warm. "I kept your favorite ready." He nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Thank you. It is always good to see you." As he ate, they talked quietly, their conversation moving from reflections on life to discussions about the future. He spoke of the responsibilities that came with what he had entrusted to her, emphasizing the importance of integrity, care, and thoughtful action. She listened, absorbing every word, understanding that the trust placed in her was not just about inheritance, but about continuing a legacy of compassion and purpose. After finishing his meal, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folder. He placed it carefully in front of her. "Inside this folder," he said, "are the details you need to begin your role fully. It includes information about the people and projects that matter, guidance on how to manage resources wisely, and insights into the values that have shaped my life. Use this as a tool, but let your heart guide your decisions." She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages filled with notes, contacts, and instructions. Her mind raced, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the responsibility but also inspired by the trust he had placed in her. She realized that her life had changed forever, and the path ahead was filled with opportunities to make a difference in ways she had never imagined. Over the next few weeks, she began to step into her new role. She continued working at the diner, but now with a new perspective, seeing each interaction as a chance to impact someone's day positively. She met with people who had been part of the old man's life, learning their stories, understanding their needs, and finding ways to support them. Each conversation, each decision, reinforced the lesson she had learned. True wealth was not measured in money alone, but in the positive impact one could have on others. She also began exploring projects the old man had cared about, from community initiatives to educational programs. She discovered that even small efforts could create ripples of change, touching lives in ways that were often unseen but deeply meaningful. She learned to listen, to observe, and to act with patience and intention, understanding that leadership was not about authority, but about service and responsibility. One evening, as she walked home from the diner, she paused to look at the stars above. The quiet night felt filled with possibility, a reflection of the journey she was now undertaking. She thought about the old man, about the word heir, and about the trust he had placed in her. She understood that this journey was about more than following instructions. It was about embodying the values he had recognized in her and using them to create a life of purpose and meaning. As days turned into weeks, she saw changes not only in her life, but in the lives of those around her. The diner became more than a place to eat. It became a hub of warmth, connection, and care. People noticed the difference, drawn to the genuine kindness and attention that she brought to every interaction. She realized that her influence, though subtle, was growing, and that her choices were making a real impact on her community. The old man visited periodically, each time offering guidance, encouragement, and wisdom. He watched her grow into the role she had been entrusted with, his confidence in her unwavering. He reminded her that mistakes would happen, that challenges were inevitable, but that the measure of a person was not in perfection but in the willingness to act with integrity and care. One afternoon, as they sat together in the quiet diner, he spoke softly. "You have done more than I could have hoped," he said. "You have honored the trust placed in you, and you have done so with grace and thoughtfulness. Remember, the journey is ongoing, and there will always be opportunities to grow, to learn, and to make a difference." She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had stepped into a role that mattered, that her actions were meaningful, and that she had the support and guidance of someone who had recognized her potential. The lessons she had learned about kindness, attention, and responsibility had shaped her into a person capable of carrying forward a legacy of compassion and purpose. In the months that followed, she continued to manage her responsibilities with care. She balanced her work at the diner with the projects and initiatives she had taken on, always mindful of the impact of her actions. She found joy in helping others, in creating opportunities, and in fostering a sense of community. The word heir no longer felt mysterious. It had become a symbol of the path she was walking, a reminder of the values she had embraced, and a guide for the life she was building. Through it all, she remained humble, never forgetting the small acts that had brought her to this point. The simple offer of soup, the smile, the attention to a stranger's needs. She understood that greatness was not achieved through grand gestures alone, but through consistent, thoughtful actions that reflected the heart and character of a person. As she looked back on the journey, she realized that her life had been transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The diner, the old man, the mysterious word, and the trust placed in her had opened doors to possibilities she had never dreamed of. She had learned that true fulfillment came from caring for others, acting with integrity, and embracing the responsibilities that life offered with courage and grace. And as she closed the diner one evening, stepping out into the cool night air, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the quiet strength and hope that now guided her life. She knew that the journey was ongoing, that there would be challenges and moments of uncertainty, but she also knew that she had the heart, the wisdom, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The simple act of offering soup had led to a life of meaning, impact, and fulfillment, and she embraced it fully, ready to continue the story that had begun with a single gesture of kindness.